The reason we called it Beautiful Schools is because we want our schools to act as the ideal backdrop for that beautiful work and to reflect that in the best light possible. And the two then become unified. Beautiful schools incorporate beautiful work, they facilitate beautiful work, and they celebrate beautiful work at the end. And so we want everybody to be approaching the design, the work, the education with the same desire for the same outcome. When you walk into a traditional classroom now, you'll see rows of tables laid out with uncomfortable sort of plastic chairs all facing the front, ready for a teacher to impart information to the students. And that's based on a 200-year-old model that came out of 19th century Prussia. It was developed as a response to industrialisation, and we're now in a sort of post-industrial environment, but we still have that format for education is very, very similar. It hasn't moved away very much at all. We're operating to a bell. We're still, it's very much a factory line kind of format, and that, that produces a particular type of learner. A learner that can regurgitate information that's been fed to them at a later date for the purposes of exams, but it's not a learner who's participating in their learning. And we haven't really moved very far away from that sort of format in terms of the design of our classrooms. They're set up in a very, in that way still, and students are there to receive information from the teacher. It's a very antiquated way of looking at engaging with young people. You're giving them a message from a really young age that the way that learning is just something where you absorb information that's given to you by someone else. But you're not asked to be creative with that information or think critically about that information particularly. The direction is you listen, you take in the information and you remember it for a later date. What we've recognised at Spaghetti Bridge is a need to move away from that way of looking at educating young learners, because the learners that come to our schools haven't thrived in that environment. And so we can't just replicate the same setup for them. It hasn't worked, and it won't work. And so we've had that challenge of looking at how we can engage those learners in a different way so that they can thrive and meet their potential. We start off by calling our base rooms rather than classrooms, because we look to move away from the language of conventional education. A base room to one of our learners should feel very different from a conventional classroom. It should look and feel inviting and non-threatening, but also something that they're not expecting, because they have unfortunately had the experience of failing in their previous settings, and that's partly due to the environment. So we need to give them the confidence that this new start with learning is going to be a positive one and it's going to engage them. So that's part of our overcoming barriers aspect to the educational model, and part of that is the environment, because it's important that they feel that they can succeed in that environment. The way that mainstream education has responded to SEND need is to create breakout spaces, and sensory hubs that children can visit when they feel dysregulated, in order to be able to recuperate enough to re-enter the classroom. And the problem with that idea is that you're waiting for a child to fail in that environment. You're taking them out of it, and you're giving them the message that they're not able, that they're not succeeding, that they're failing. You're sort of recuperating them to a certain extent and then putting them back in that same environment and asking them to be able to perform. And they're not thriving in that environment because it's hostile for them for various different reasons. But a lot of the reason is that it's the classroom environment itself. It's the harsh lighting, the lack of proprioceptive feedback that they can get from the furniture in those spaces, because there is only often one option for seating, which is a hard plastic chair. What we have tried to do at Spaghetti Bridge is make sure that the entire school environment is therapeutic and is conducive to maximising the time that a student can spend learning and engaging and succeeding in education, so that they don't have that experience of feeling like they're failing. Of course, they might need to still take breaks, and that's completely reasonable, but we want to just minimise the amount of time that they feel that they have to move away from learning and have that interruption in their learning. I have looked at the main principles of two different forms of design, which are biophilic design and trauma-informed design, and incorporated those because they have a proven track record of increasing the amount of engagement to recipients and increasing the potential health benefits in that they are calmer environments to learn in, which increases the productivity of the learners in those environments, and it also enables them to feel relaxed, which just means that they're going to be more receptive and engaged in their learning. SEN needs are better met in our base rooms through a variety of different mechanisms. One through the choice of fabrics and colours that we use, which are more muted, they're more natural, they're what you might find in a more natural environment, because we know that biophilic design uses colours that are found in nature and that has a therapeutic effect. We situate a lot of our learning under natural light so that children have that aspect of biophilic design incorporated into their learning space. We use trauma-informed aspects of design, which look at colour zoning so that a student can always orientate themselves in a space. Schools can be very large, and that can be quite an intimidating thing for some SEN learners to have to manage. And so if they're able to orientate themselves immediately in a space, it can lead to them feeling more comfortable. We do include artwork in the base room design to sort of replicate that feeling of being in a more homely environment. We tend to use abstract images of nature because that is both trauma-informed and biophilic in principle. It just avoids triggering or unpleasant memories, but that should be replaced in time with curated student work. And that enables learners to personalise the space, to feel ownership over it, and to feel proud of their work. So it's important that it's presented in a professional manner. We leave space for that in the base room so that they can present their work and feel ownership over it. The reason that it's important that the work looks professionally curated is partly because it informs that student's feeling about how they present their work. So it means that they approach a project with an idea that they finish it to an absolutely professional level, which would be how they'd be expected to perform when they leave education. But it's also because we want to maintain a low sensory environment so that the work is curated on the wall so that it doesn't start to create a visual stress, a visual overload. A curated volume of work for that student represents a success to them. And so they've come from an environment where they feel that they've been having persistent failures, and then they go into an environment where their work is celebrated to such an extent that they can really see the success that they've had, and that they can feel that, and that feeds into a sense of belonging in the school and in the space, and that helps them to exist in that space in a way that is more conducive to producing more work and engaging in more learning. Another thing that we try and do with our design of our schools is constantly look at research and feedback from the current educational operators. And so we arrange forums for discussion where they bring to us any findings that they've had in relation to the design and in relation to the way that the learners engage with the way that we've designed the schools, so that we can modify our existing sites and that we can ensure that future school sites are optimised in terms of the design. Our learners are constantly evolving. The environment that they're learning in is constantly evolving, and the future that they're going to have in terms of where they're going out into the world, in terms of their employment, is constantly evolving. So we need to evolve our education and our spaces in relation to that education in line with that. And you can't do that unless you're listening to operators and educators and feeding that into what you're doing. All children should feel proud of their school, and part of that's the environment, reflected through their work that's finished at the end. But I also think all students deserve to feel like they're working in a nice environment. It's basic, isn't it?